In my 40 years on the bench, I've seen defendants from every walk of life, the wealthy and the poor, the remorseful and the defiant, the scared and the arrogant. But this one stayed with me long after I delivered my ruling. When Marcus Whitmore walked into my courtroom, the 24-year-old son of billionaire tech CEO Richard Whitmore, he had already mocked a disabled veteran in a grocery store parking lot, laughed at the arresting officers, and posted on social media that this was all beneath him. What he didn't know was that the veteran he mocked, Robert Chen, had lost his leg serving this country in Afghanistan. And what Marcus was about to learn was that in my courtroom, your last name and your father's bank account mean absolutely nothing. Let me tell you what happened and why this case went viral with over 8 million views. The case file arrived on my desk on a Tuesday morning. Assault and battery, harassment, disturbing the peace. As I opened it, I saw the victim's name, Staff Sergeant Robert Chen, USMC, retired, 42 years old, Purple Heart recipient, double amputee. I stopped right there. I've always had a special place in my heart for veterans. My own father served in World War II. I know what these men and women sacrifice. So when I see a case involving a veteran, especially one who gave his legs for this country, I pay extra attention. The defendant, Marcus Whitmore, 24 years old, unemployed, living off a trust fund. His father, Richard Whitmore, had built a tech empire worth $3.2 billion. Marcus had been arrested twice before, DUI and possession, but both times those charges mysteriously disappeared. Money has a way of making problems go away, but not this time, not in my courtroom. As I read through the police report, I watched the cell phone footage that had been submitted as evidence. A bystander had filmed the entire incident, and I have to tell you, what I saw made my blood run cold. This wasn't just disrespect, this wasn't just arrogance, this was cruelty in its purest form. I sat back in my chair and thought about how I was going to handle this, because I just knew, that Marcus Whitmore was going to walk into my courtroom expecting the same treatment he'd gotten his entire privileged life. He was wrong. Here's what happened that Sunday afternoon at the Providence Place Shopping Center. According to the police report and the video footage I reviewed multiple times, Robert Chen had just finished grocery shopping. He was loading bags into his specially modified van, the one with hand controls because, of course, he has no legs. He uses a wheelchair, has since an IED took both his legs below the knee in Helmand Province in 2012. Marcus Whitmore pulled his $200,000 Lamborghini into the handicapped spot right next to Robert's van. No placard, no permit, just parked there like he owned the place. Robert, being the polite man he is, and I learned this from multiple witnesses, rolled his wheelchair over and said, "Excuse me, sir, but that's a handicapped spot. You need a permit to park there." When I watched the video, I could see Marcus look down at Robert in his wheelchair, and then he laughed, actually laughed. He said, and I quote from the audio, "What are you, the parking police? Mind your own business, wheels." Wheels. He called this decorated Marine veteran wheels. I had to pause the video right there. I felt my blood pressure rising, and I've been doing this job long enough to know I need to stay objective. But hearing that word, seeing the disrespect on this young man's face, it tested my composure. Robert kept his cool better than I would have. He said, "Sir, I'm a disabled veteran. I'm just asking you to respect the law and move your car." That's when Marcus said something that made my jaw drop. "Oh, you're a hero," he said with the most sarcastic tone imaginable. "Let me guess, you want me to thank you for your service? You probably parked your wheelchair in front of an IED on purpose, just to get sympathy and free parking. I've been a judge for 4 decades. I've heard terrible things. But mocking a man for losing his leg serving our country, that was a new low." The video showed Robert's face change, not anger, sadness, deep, profound sadness. And that broke my heart more than anything. But Marcus wasn't done. As Robert turned his wheelchair to leave, because that's the kind of man he is, he was just going to walk away, Marcus stepped in front of him and said, "Where are you rolling off to, Gimp? I'm not done talking to you." When Robert tried to go around him, Marcus pushed the wheelchair. Hard enough that Robert nearly tipped over backward. a 42-year-old double amputee, nearly thrown from his wheelchair by some punk kid who'd never worked a day in his life. That's when several bystanders intervened. That's when someone called 911, and that's when Marcus made his biggest mistake. When the police arrived, this is in the police report, Marcus told Officer Patricia Gonzalez, and I quote, "Do you know who my father is? Richard Whitmore. One phone call and your job is gone. This cripple attacked me, and I was defending myself." Officer Gonzalez, God bless her, looked at the dozen witnesses and the video footage and said, "Turn around, Mr. Whitmore. You're under arrest." Marcus laughed. He actually laughed as they cuffed him. He told the officers, "This will be dismissed by Monday. My dad's lawyer will have your badges." He posted bail within 2 hours, and by that evening, he'd posted on Instagram, his public Instagram account with 50,000 followers, a photo of himself drinking champagne with the caption, "Fake veteran tried to scam me. Police in this city are a joke. Dad's handling it. Sunk above the law, Whitmore power." By the time this case landed on my desk, that post had been screenshot and shared everywhere. The video had millions of views. Veterans groups were outraged. The public was calling for justice, and they were about to get it. As I continued reviewing the evidence, I wanted to make absolutely certain I understood every detail. That's my job. No matter how clear something seems, no matter how angry it makes me, I have to review everything objectively. The medical report showed that Robert had bruising on his shoulders and chest from where Marcus pushed him. At 42 years old, with his physical condition, a fall from his wheelchair could have caused serious injury. The examining physician noted that Robert was lucky he hadn't been hurt worse. 7 witnesses gave statements. Every single one corroborated the same story. Marcus parked illegally, mocked Robert's disability, called him multiple slurs, and then physically assaulted him by pushing his wheelchair. 3 separate people had video footage from different angles. I watched all of it. I must have watched it 10 times, hoping I'd see something, anything, that would suggest this wasn't as bad as it looked. It was worse. In one video, you could clearly see Robert's face when Marcus called him Gimp. This was a man who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan, who'd earned a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a Navy Cross, who'd given his legs for this country, and some spoiled trust fund kid was calling him names in a parking lot. The arrest record showed Marcus had been verbally abusive to the officers. He'd threatened them repeatedly. He'd name-dropped his father at least 15 times. Even at the station, he'd refused to take it seriously. But here's what really got me. My clerk brought me printouts of Marcus's social media history. Over the past year, he'd posted multiple times, mocking homeless people, making fun of disabled individuals, and bragging about getting away with things because of his father's money. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. This was who Marcus Whitmore was, an entitled, cruel young man who'd never been held accountable for anything in his life. At 69 years old, I've learned that people can change. But first, they have to face consequences. And Marcus Whitmore was about to face the consequences of his actions for the first time in his privileged life. By the time Marcus's court date arrived 3 weeks later, this case had exploded across social media. My clerk, Jennifer, told me the parking lot video had been viewed over 15 million times. News outlets were covering it. Veterans organizations were calling my office asking about the trial date. The hashtag Justice for Robert Chen was trending. I've been doing this job since 1985. I've never let public opinion influence my decisions, and I wasn't about to start now. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel the weight of this case differently. This wasn't just about Robert and Marcus anymore. This had become a symbol, a test of whether our justice system actually works the same for everyone, regardless of wealth or privilege. My bailiff, Tony, told me the courtroom was going to be packed. Veterans groups had organized. Media had requested access. Marcus's father had hired one of the most expensive defense attorneys in New England. I told Tony the same thing I always tell him. Same rules apply. First come, first served for public seating. Media in the designated area. And in my courtroom, everyone gets the same respect and the same treatment under the law. The night before the trial, I sat in my study at home, reviewing the case file one more time. My wife, Joyce, brought me tea and asked if I was okay. "This one's important," I told her. She smiled. "They're all important to you, Frank." She was right. But this one felt different, because I knew millions of people were watching to see if justice actually meant something, watching to see if a wealthy defendant would get away with it again. They were about to find out. When Marcus Whitmore walked into my courtroom that Thursday morning, I observed everything. He was wearing a designer suit. I later learned it cost $8,000, with expensive shoes and a watch that probably cost more than most people's cars. His lawyer, David Chen, no relation to Robert, was beside him in an equally expensive suit. Behind them sat Richard Whitmore, the billionaire father, looking stern and powerful. But what struck me most was Marcus's demeanor. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't remorseful. He looked bored, like this was beneath him, like he was already thinking about what he'd do after this nuisance was resolved. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled. I saw dozens of veterans, many in wheelchairs, many with visible disabilities. They'd come to support Robert. In the front row sat Robert Chen himself, in his wheelchair, wearing his Marine Corps dress uniform with his medals displayed. When I saw Robert sitting there with such dignity, such quiet strength, I felt a surge of respect. This man had every right to be angry, to be bitter, but he just sat there calm and composed, trusting the system to work. I wasn't going to let him down. "All rise," Tony announced, and the proceedings began. I looked at Marcus and said, "Mr. Whitmore, you're charged with assault and battery, harassment, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. How do you plead?" His lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. My client—" I held up my hand. "I asked your client, Counselor. Mr. Whitmore, how do you plead?" Marcus stood slowly, like even standing was an inconvenience. "Not guilty," he said with a smirk. That smirk, I've seen it 1,000 times, the smirk of someone who thinks they're untouchable. "Very well," I said. "Let's proceed." The prosecution presented their case. They played the video footage on the courtroom monitors. I watched it again for the 11th time, and I watched the jury's faces. I watched the veterans in the gallery. I watched Robert's face as he relived his humiliation. And I watched Marcus. He was texting. During the video presentation of his own trial, this young man was texting on his phone. "Mr. Whitmore," I said firmly, "put the phone away, now." He looked up, surprised that anyone would dare speak to him that way. He pocketed the phone with an exaggerated sigh. When the prosecution finished, Marcus's attorney stood to present his defense. And I have to give him credit, he was good. He argued that Marcus had felt threatened, that Robert had approached his vehicle aggressively, that the push was defensive, not aggressive, that the words were taken out of context. It was creative. It was expensive lawyering. It was also complete nonsense. "Your Honor," the defense attorney said, "my client is a young man who made a mistake in judgment. He's willing to complete community service and issue an apology. We ask for leniency given his age and lack of prior convictions." I looked at the file. "Counselor, your client has 2 prior arrests that were dismissed." "Dismissed, Your Honor, not convictions. The law presumes innocence." He was technically right. Those charges had disappeared, but I knew why. And so did everyone else in that courtroom. "Noted," I said. "I'd like to hear from the victim. Staff Sergeant Chen, would you like to make a statement?" Robert wheeled himself to the front. He didn't need help. He didn't want pity. He positioned himself in front of the bench and looked up at me. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady, "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because what happened that day wasn't about me. It was about what this young man thinks he can get away with." He turned his wheelchair to face Marcus. "I lost my legs in Afghanistan serving this country. I don't regret it. I'd do it again. But what I won't tolerate is being mocked for my sacrifice by someone who's never sacrificed anything in his life." The courtroom was silent. You could hear a pin drop. "I don't want to ruin his life," Robert continued. "I want him to learn, to understand that every person deserves respect, that disability doesn't make someone less human, that service and sacrifice mean something." He wheeled back to his spot. Several veterans were wiping their eyes. I looked at Marcus. "Mr. Whitmore, would you like to say anything?" his lawyer whispered to him. probably telling him to show remorse, to apologize, to play the game. Marcus stood. Your Honor, I think this has been blown way out of proportion. It was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry if he felt disrespected, but stop right there, I said. If he felt disrespected, Mr. Whitmore, you called this decorated Marine veteran Wheels, Gimp, and mocked him for losing his legs. That's not a feeling. That's a fact. Marcus shrugged, actually shrugged in my courtroom and said, people are too sensitive these days. I felt my patience wearing thin. Mr. Whitmore, do you understand the seriousness of these charges? I understand that this is a waste of everyone's time, he said, his true colors finally showing. My father will appeal whatever you decide. We have the best lawyers money can buy. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I banged my gavel. Mr. Whitmore, you're not helping yourself, I said. I don't need help, he replied. I need this to be over so I can get back to my life. That's when my bailiff approached and handed me his tablet. Your Honor, you need to see this. Posted 20 minutes ago. I looked at the screen. It was Marcus's Twitter account, posted from inside my courthouse, probably during a bathroom break. The tweet read, Judge Caprio thinks he's so important. This is literally a joke. Fake war hero trying to get attention. I'll be out by lunch. Whitmore power, ye above the law. I stared at that screen for a long moment. Then I looked at Marcus. Mr. Whitmore, did you post this tweet 20 minutes ago? His lawyer's face went pale. Your Honor, I was not aware. I'm asking your client, I said. Did you post this? Marcus looked defiant. Yeah, I did. Freedom of speech. I took a breath, composed myself. This wasn't about my feelings. This was about justice. But this young man had just made this very easy for me. I've been on this bench for 40 years. I've seen defendants make every mistake possible. But what Marcus Whitmore did, mocking a veteran, assaulting a disabled person, showing zero remorse, and then mocking these proceedings on social media, that combination was something special. I looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Whitmore, I want you to understand something. The courtroom went silent. I've been a judge since 1985. I've seen thousands of defendants walk through that door. Some are remorseful, some are scared. Some genuinely made mistakes they regret. I paused. You're not one of those people. Marcus crossed his arms. You assaulted a disabled veteran in a parking lot. You mocked him for his disability, a disability he received serving this country. You called him names. You physically pushed his wheelchair. And when you were arrested, you threatened police officers and bragged about getting away with it. I paused again. Then today, during these proceedings, you posted on social media calling Staff Sergeant Chen a fake war hero and calling these proceedings a joke. I picked up the evidence folder. Let me tell you what's not a joke, Mr. Whitmore. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He earned a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a Navy Cross. He lost both legs when his convoy hit an IED while he was protecting his fellow Marines. He spent the last 12 years rebuilding his life, learning to walk again on prosthetics, contributing to his community. I looked directly at Marcus. And you've spent the last 24 years living off your father's money, getting arrested and having charges disappear and mocking people you consider beneath you. His lawyer tried to stand. Your Honor, sit down, counselor, I'm not finished. I turned back to Marcus. This sentence isn't about punishment, it's about teaching you what you should have learned long ago. Respect, accountability, and that your actions have consequences. Because right now, the person I see in front of me, that's not who you should be. And I'm going to give you a chance to figure out who you can be. I looked at my notes. Here's what I'm ordering. I'm finding you guilty on all charges. Assault and battery, harassment, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I could hear people in the gallery holding their breath. You are sentenced to 18 months in the Providence County Correctional Facility. This is the maximum sentence for these combined charges. Marcus's face went white. His father stood up in the gallery, outraged. Additionally, I continued, you will complete 500 hours of community service at the Rhode Island Veterans Home, working directly with disabled veterans. You will learn what service means, what sacrifice looks like, what respect requires. Furthermore, you are prohibited from using social media for the duration of your sentence and probation period. Every post you've made mocking disabled individuals, veterans, and public servants shows a pattern of behavior that needs to change. You will also attend mandatory counseling sessions twice weekly to address your complete lack of empathy and your sense of entitlement. Upon completion of your sentence, you will be on probation for 3 years. Any violation of these terms will result in additional jail time. I looked at Robert Chen, sitting there in his wheelchair with such dignity. And finally, you will write a formal apology to Staff Sergeant Chen, handwritten, not typed, explaining what you learned and how you plan to change. He doesn't have to accept it, but you will write it. I set down my gavel. Mr. Whitmore, I hope you use this time to think about who you want to be, because right now the person I see in front of me is someone who has never been told no, someone who thinks money makes them above the law, someone who thinks cruelty is funny and service is worthless. I paused one last time. In my courtroom, everyone is equal. Your father's billions mean nothing here. What matters is how you treat people. And today you learned that the hard way. I banged my gavel. This court is adjourned. After I adjourned court, the courtroom erupted in applause. I don't usually allow that, but I understood. This was bigger than just one case. This was about accountability, about justice actually meaning something. Marcus was led away by bailiffs, no longer smirking, no longer texting, finally understanding that actions have consequences. His father was screaming about appeals, about lawsuits, about how this wasn't over. But it was over. And deep down, Richard Whitmore knew it. Robert Chen wheeled up to the bench. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said quietly. I stepped down from the bench, something I rarely do, and shook his hand. "Robert, thank you for your service. Thank you for your patience through this whole process. And thank you for your dignity. You showed more grace than most people could have." He smiled. "I just wanted him to learn something, Your Honor." "I think he will," I said. "It might take time, but I think he will." After everyone left, I sat in my chambers with my clerk, Jennifer. She told me the video of my ruling was already going viral. Within hours, it had millions of views. People were sharing it everywhere with captions like, "This is justice," and finally a judge who holds the wealthy accountable. "Judge, you're trending," Jennifer said with a smile. I shook my head. "I didn't do this for views or likes, Jennifer. I did it because it was right, but I'll admit, I was glad people were watching. Because maybe, just maybe, other entitled young people would see this and think twice before mocking a veteran or assaulting a disabled person." Over the following weeks, I received hundreds of letters. Veterans thanked me. Disabled advocates thanked me. Parents thanked me for showing their children that consequences are real. But the letter that meant the most came from Robert Chen. He wrote to tell me that Marcus had completed his first week at the Veterans Home, that Marcus was quiet, respectful, and seemed to be listening, that maybe, just maybe, this experience was changing him. I hope so. I genuinely do. Because I don't sentence people to destroy their lives. I sentence them to teach them, to give them a chance to become better. Time will tell if Marcus Whitmore learns that lesson. But at least now, he has the opportunity to try. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this case, it's this. Respect is not optional. Accountability is not negotiable. And your wealth, your connections, your father's name, none of that places you above basic human decency. Marcus Whitmore thought he was untouchable. He'd spent 24 years learning that money solves problems and consequences don't apply to him. But in my courtroom, everyone stands equal before the law. The billionaire's son and the homeless veteran get the same justice. That's what America's supposed to be about. I've been a judge for 40 years, and I've seen this pattern too many times. Young people, usually wealthy ones, who've never been told no, who've never faced consequences, who think cruelty is entertainment and that social media posts don't have real-world implications. But they do. Every post, mocking someone's disability, every cruel comment, every moment of disrespect, it all reflects who you are. And eventually you have to face that person in the mirror. Robert Chen, that Marine veteran in the wheelchair, showed more strength and character in 10 minutes than Marcus had shown in 24 years. Robert could have been angry, bitter, vengeful. Instead, he was dignified, patient, and hopeful that this young man could learn and change. That's what real strength looks like. So to everyone watching this video, especially young people, treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Respect veterans. Respect disabled individuals. Respect service workers, police officers, and anyone just trying to do their job. Your father's money won't save you from being a terrible person. Your social media followers won't make cruelty acceptable. What matters, what has always mattered, is character, integrity, respect, empathy. Marcus Whitmore is getting a chance to learn these lessons. I hope he takes it. Because at 24 years old, he still has time to become someone his father can actually be proud of. Someone who treats people with dignity. Someone who understands that true strength isn't about power or money. It's about service and sacrifice. After 40 years on this bench, that's what I still believe. That's what justice means to me. And that's why I'll keep fighting for it, one case at a time.